Welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's David. I'm Charles. Hopefully, O will be joining us, but I know it's been a busy, crazy week for a lot of people, man. How have you been, David? I missed you boys last week.
Yeah, we held it down last week. We did our best without you. Figured we learned some new tech tips last week on the StreamYard. But yeah, things have been good. I've been thinking some of the work I've been doing this last week has been primarily with school leadership teams, and I know that summer is never quite as long as it should be for people. It's not as long as it should be for for teachers. We see that a lot.
Mhm.
But I'm like, I'm working with these leadership teams, and they're essentially working through the summer. They go from like closing out the last school year, and then they take like maybe a week off if they're lucky, maybe two, and then right back
Mhm.
at it. So they're prepared for that August launch. Both planning and making sure the buildings are ready, making sure that curriculum is ordered, doing all of the scheduling, all of that stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah, just a shout out to all the administrator, heads of schools, principals, executive directors that are um, out there doing the work over summertime. I think a lot of that work goes unnoticed, but I want to notice it right now. So, people like Omar, right?
Yeah, he's out there, man. Speaking of, man, we got him.
There he
You know what I'm
is.
saying? We got
Yeah.
that. Let's see that glow. You know what I'm saying? The man is glowing. How you doing, brother? What's the weather out there? Is it a brisk 92 degrees? What's the weather out there?
Oh man, you'd be surprised, man. Texas, El Paso, you got yourself the sweetest little weather, man. It's a nice, sweet 110 degrees.
Oh,
Your
You
hair is
walk
sweating, like not your
outside
forehead,
and
but your hair.
you turn into the immediate
it's crazy.
like dissolved powder that could be baby formula because I just turned into essentially ashes and can now feed humanity with the level of dehydration that you do that you get when you walk outside. It's awesome, man. It feels so good to know that the weather outside could literally start a thermonuclear reaction at any time.
Well, I need
Wow.
to be there and have a natural sauna so I can lose some of this weight. So, how you been, man?
I've been stressed, but good. I mean, look, we're coming back to school under two of the most extraordinary circumstances we've ever seen in education, the greatest teacher and educator resignation
Yeah.
that we've seen ever, and the greatest learning loss that we've ever seen in modern day education. So education's a stressful place because you got people being like, man, you got to make up that learning loss. And I'm like, yeah, I know, man, I'm for it. But hey, thanks for paying attention finally to the fact that like we've been undereducating our minorities for the last 70 years. Thanks for also saying we need to do something about it when you have absolutely no idea what to do about it, but putting stress on people like me that are actually trying to solve it, right?
Hey, man. I mean, and that's the thing, but that's why we're so thankful for you and what you do. And I think you make it look good the way you do it. But I think I don't know if you want to do it this show when it's your goal. You weren't here for to be the pre-show where we were kind of game planning, but I would love to hear more about
Mhm.
those two things and the confluence of those things because I don't think people truly understand, or can we need to help people fully appreciate the magnitude of what's happening and what leaders like you are under right now. And I think for me, that goes into what I wanted to talk to today because I do research for a living. I just started crunching some California numbers. I have a cohort in Stockton. I haven't done Oakland's yet because I'm going to do that with Marquise, my program manager, and I want him to learn how to do it. I mean, David and I are just nerds and we do this type of stuff for fun. But data tells a story. And I think that part of the reason, one, that black kids and brown kids don't seem to think um, that they're math people is because I think that we don't have a healthy approach in how we talk about math. But when you can see the story inside of it and kind of see what it's saying, I think it's actually really different. So my check-in, it's been a very busy week, a little stressed out as well, Omar and David. Definitely missed y'all. Y'all are like y'all, and especially my book club on every Saturday, like my calming factor, right? Because I'm like through the week I'm just running and I'm just going. So definitely missed y'all last week. It was a little bit out of my hands on why I had to miss, but I'm back now. And I wanted to talk about these 2021 ELA numbers. Since for y'all that don't know, that's English Language Arts, and I can look in other states or whatnot, but I promise you it's going to look very similar. So I want to, before I put this on the screen, fellas, I just want to highlight that we live in one of the richest countries. I mean, we live in one of the richest states that are in one of the richest countries in the history of this blue rock. Like, I just want to start by saying that as I pull this up. This is California's data. So like I said, I did all of Stockton, but I also did all of California so they can have an apples to apples comparison. And I'm going to break this down. This is juniors from 2020, 2021 that took the state testing around English Language Arts. Now, here's a first story that the data is telling you. You said something interesting earlier, Omar. You said minority, how we've been treating or teaching our minority students. We're going to have to stop saying minorities in a minute, because this is a microcosm of what the future looks like in California. So in this first top row,
true that, man, true that.
Number of students,
Wow,
there were
look at that.
24,550 Black juniors, and only 8,000 took this test, by the way. There were 257,000 Hispanic or Latino students, which is what that's how they are classified on the results. So, you know, I know people tend to have feelings about how things are said. 45,7 Asian students, 12,000 Filipino students, and there's a whole history as to why that's separated or whatnot. That's a whole different story in of itself. And 106,734 white students. The Latino Hispanic kids have lapped the white kids, and when you understand this, like we've talked about a lot of these policies, right, that have like kind of come up, and I know you putting in your notes, David, or one of y'all, just mute your thing real quick for the typing. But
Omar's typing. He's typing on an old typewriter, man.
Oh, it's all good.
Keyboard.
Omar, hey, Omar, get in there and do your thing, baby. Just mute yourself. Yeah, you good. We was in there with you though. But yeah, so that's the first story that this is telling. Like, who is actually the minority in California? And as a Black student, as a Black man, as a Black boy who went to school there, where when I went there, Westlake was a majority Black school, or at least it felt like it. To now, you know, when the city had a lot more Black students, to not even being like, we've kind of fallen out a lot. And the first story that this tells is people tend to wonder why this abortion law stuff is going so hard. One of the reasons is because there are very powerful white people that fear that they are just not producing enough people in their race. Is however you feel about it, whether you agree or disagree, that's not my concern. I'm just telling you, and it's because they're looking at data like this, and they're looking at forecasts, and it's going to keep growing. Actually, the numbers are projected for the gap to even widen of Latino, Hispanic population versus that of white or any other group, to be quite honest with you. So before I get into the even test, let me just pause there for a minute and just get reactions.
I mean, I'll just go quickly. I don't really have a reaction. I won't react necessarily to the actual performance data, but I will definitely react to the those numbers that you presented. Just, I mean, looking across, so we're talking about all of California's public schools, right?
11th graders, they're juniors.
11th grade, an 11th grade cut, and then just looking at the number of students that took this test, or that are in the grade that should have taken the test. I think, you know, Latino students we are the majority in California. I think that my big takeaway is just like the significant shift in demographic. And then within that, you have everything. So everything that is in that one number are people like me that, you know, whose parents were born here and grandparents are born here, and my family's been here since before it was the United States of America, right? And also included in that data set is a recent immigrant from Guatemala who doesn't even speak Spanish. Maybe they speak Mam, right? And so I'm just thinking about the big number and the explosion in that, but also the diversity within the diaspora that falls within the group that we call Latinos, Latinas.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, any thoughts from you on it?
Yeah, man. No, I mean, I think that was like very well encapsulated. I want to take this from like a different perspective, which is essentially like I don't want to conflate things, but folks need to know that they're sadly inextricably connected. The the data in this country supports one facet beyond all reasonable recognition. Middle and high income kids are always going to do well because essentially the learning that is garnered from home at home, honestly, almost, I don't want to say makes like education obsolete, but it's like they're doing their own learning. And
Right.
what we've realized as a country is that let me scratch that term. Low income students, regardless of race, do extraordinarily poor. It just so happens that the majority of low income people happen to be Black and brown. And what you're realizing now is that data is coming out to prove what we've been screaming about for the last 70 years. There is a disparaging sense of what we are doing to actually figure out a solution for low-income students. Now, let me give you just a quick story to encapsulate what I'm talking about. I'm at dinner last night, and I'm with a potential candidate for a school. She's amazing. She's an attorney. She's Black. You know, she grew up, North Carolina, East Coast, that area, and so forth. And she's like, listen, like, my parents sent me to a private school because that public school wasn't going to do what they thought was needing to do for me to get me to like the stage that I'm at. And that private school basically ran like a college. I had free periods junior year, I had free periods senior year, and I was learning all this like, time management and so forth. And I was like, look, that's amazing. Here's the fundamental problem that we see in education. The reason your private school could do that was because the learning gains as a result of high income families and stable families is up here. Therefore, you have the autonomy because your literacy levels are through the roof, your math levels are through the roof, your critical and creative problem solving things are through the roof. So yeah, no big deal for a private school to do that. When your literacy levels and math levels and critical thinking levels are so low because public education has done such a poor job of developing those skill sets for you, what this country has fundamentally failed to do is figure out how to get those kids up to this level of autonomy through the school system instead of through the family. Now, I'm not saying replace family by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying is that the school systems haven't figured out how to do this. And as a result, you're expecting this kind of behavior from students who have been subjugated and marginalized at this academic level. Our goal with low-income kids is to get them up to this level and then provide an educational outlet where they're able to do what those private schools can do. And I just told you the mission of the El Paso Leadership Academy through and through, and what David was doing in Oakland and what Dr. Cole is trying to do, which is essentially, if we're going to have the freedom and autonomy to be the makers of our own destiny, that requires an insane level of educational aptitude that our current school system is not doing. And that is the big rub for me.
And I think that was actually perfect into what I was about to go into next, right? And I think what you laid up is, I don't care how you feel about like data. I don't care how you feel about this test. I don't care if you're saying like, yo, this is like, this test is racist. I think most things are racist. I just want to be very frank with you, right? But there's a story that's being told here. There's a story that's being told here, right? And I think that's the piece that I want to highlight. So let me just go through this. So 1 out of 24,000 kids, only 8,000 took the test. All right, that's first off. And also, this is charter and traditional kids. Private schools don't have to report anything to you. This is everybody combined. And so L4, this is what you also need to know. L4 means that somebody has surpassed, they have exceeded the expectations, right? That is what an L4 means. The standards exceeded. L3 is standards are met. L2 is very interesting and intriguing to me, especially in this climate where people talk about participation trophies. L2 is standard almost met, standard nearly met. You didn't need it, but it's nearly met. And then L1 is standard not met. So what I did was, because I'm a nerd, is I netted these things. That is adding L3 and L4. So 42% of all those black kids are at proficiency or above. 57% of those kids that took this test are not. And we don't even know what that big gap or swath that did not take it where they stand, right? You can forecast, you can try to extrapolate, but you're going to be making some assumptions. Now, when we go to the Hispanic, it kind of moves to the right. 50% of the brown students in California that took this test, there was 257,000, 115,000 took it. 50% of those young people were proficient. And as you just pointed out, David, actually, I don't think that, I wouldn't say this is like hopeful or whatever the case is, but I would look at it like this. David just said many of those kids don't even speak English. Many of those kids are coming from different places. We don't know how long they've been here. You know what I'm saying? And for them to be at 50% with 49% not proficient, I think that says something. I think that says something pretty striking. And I actually think that I think that is scaring a lot of people. I think that is scaring a lot of people because I only see that number going up. And I'll tell you why. When you get to Asian, and again, Asian, just like brown, just like black, there is a lot. Asia's a huge place. There's a lot of different people. There's a lot of things to extrapolate. There were 45,000 students. 23,000 of their students took the test. All right. So they probably have the smallest gap of who did not take that test.
Yeah.
82% of the net were proficient and 17% were not. Filipino is extrapolated from Asian, is not in there for whatever reason. Again, that's a whole different show. 77% of those young people were proficient, 22% were not. And white kids, probably for one of the first times in a long time, or if it has happened before, it doesn't happen very often before. But they come in at 68% proficiency, being beat by two other groups, and only 31% are not proficient. Now, I'm just gonna go through my major points, and then I'm gonna shut up so we can go on to different topics. Okay, so there's 3 things that I want you to take from this, and let me tell you why. First off, you need to demand to know your child's results and ask what they mean. You need to understand, if I had a kid at a school and my kid came in at L2, but an educator was trying to pump me up around an L2 for my child, I would personally have a problem with it, because my thing is, what is the expectation you have for my child? I know about the test we can talk about the test being racist. We can talk about the test not being kind of there for people, English learners or whatnot. It's listen, you just showed me numbers where a large swath of these young people, English is not their first language. And this is Black African American, by the way. I want to say that it's not just Black in the full diaspora, it's Black and or African American. I think, but that's one. You need to know where your kid stands. And I'm gonna tell you why that's important, but that takes us into 2. And then you need to look at the extrapolate, and then look at how is the school doing, how is this district or this city or this county doing, however your place breaks down. Because let me tell you why. I was a big fish in a very small pond, meaning I would have graduated from Emory High in the top 10 percentile of my school. But when I went to Bear Creek my senior year in Stockton, and then when I went to college, the fact that I was at the top percentile of that school did not mean anything to a school that was actually giving me on grade level work. Let me say that again. Many of our kids that are Black, brown, poor, whatever the case is, many of them, even if they are perfectly proficient, are not even getting work at the level in which they should be getting. Okay.
Yep.
So you want to see that, because you also do want to see how people around you are performing and what you can do. And I know we all in this time around, we don't want to do competition. The world is built off of competition. I'm sorry. I'm just sick of this, man. I'm so sick of people, for their kids, they want the best. They want to make sure their kids are doing well. They want to make sure things are happening. But then when we talk about this system and what we can do, especially when people work in that system, they're like, well, let's not do that. Or this test was this test was that, or whatever the case is, right? I want the best for my kids. If it's my kids, you need to tell me what it is. And then that brings me to this. You need to build a plan regardless of the results. If your kid is L4, super proficient, then you need to build a plan to make sure that the work that they're getting is on its grade level and how you can exceed that. If your kid is at an L1, then you need to make a plan that fits wherever your kid is. But Omar said this. Omar just did this whole thing, which I thought was actually really dope. And I'm feeling you, Omar, where you're like, the system has not been able to like get these kids up to this place. And what I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, is that do not put your faith in the system by itself. Push this system, know what you're talking about, have these numbers, but it might take a plan at home. It might take you calling an Omar or a Charles or a David and saying, hey, this is where my kid is. Do you have any idea? Do you have any thoughts on things that I can do outside of the school? Or maybe if I should transfer this kid or put him in after school programs or whatever the case is. I am saying that this data that has been coming over and over and over and over again, I am tired of being last on this list. I don't wish for brown, Asian, Filipino, or white to be worse than my people. But damn, I'm looking at these numbers. We are the only ones out of these major groups that are under 50% proficiency. And if you're watching this, it should bother you as well. And oh yeah, all of this plays into these politics that Texas and California and Florida are having a field day pushing. All of this Florida versus California with Texas kind of in the mix, this stuff is right there. They are looking at this stuff. Whether you want to engage or not, the system is engaging you and banking on you not doing anything. So I went kind of long. I'm going to stop there. But this is just what's been on my mind as I've been living in this data for the last week. And it's depressing me. And I'm tired of yelling at the system because the system is going to system as it's never system before. But I'm talking to my people in my community. We cannot no longer we can't accept it. And as long as we keep accepting it, this shit is going to keep happening. So I'll shut up. I'll stop there. I don't know. Y'all take it away. Sorry, I'm sweating.
Yeah, no. So I have a couple of reflections based on what you're presenting here, Charles, and I want to respond to a comment in the comments. I think it's Bill, who's on somebody else's account, which is fine. So actually, I do think these statewide standardized metrics matter. They may not matter, in so much like the granularity of understanding what's happening between a teacher and a student and their family. That might be the one area where I can go back and forth, but they should definitely matter to a particular school, a particular departments that are getting these results, grade levels. And then, if you're a charter network, your network, if you're a district, your district, because, you can imagine, like, Charles, if you're one of my students, I'm going to issue you a report card. Kind of subjective, right? Subjective, some objective measures, but mainly there's a lot of subjectivity mixed in there. And then in addition to that, Charles, I'm going to also present to you and your family your our school-wide assessment, our formative assessment. So maybe we do the NWEA 3 times a year. And so there's a better chunk of data that we can look at. This is how Charles did in the fall on math and reading. Right. Here's how he did in the winter. Here's how he did in the spring. You better see, we expect to see some growth. And then the third larger one is the standardized measure. If you're an EL student in California, it's the LPAC. Every state has their own different standardized metric for English language learners. So I think all these combined should paint a particular picture. And when we have a problem is going back to your data that you presented, Charles, and looking at some of the data that just comes out of San Francisco. They have high graduation rates for African-American students, but the actual academic achievement on these assessments are horrific. And you're socially promoting children, right? So schools should be looking at a number of different multiple measures. Some of them may be out of line, but in general, there should be some general level of a trend, right?
Right.
And so I mean, I think that's one of my reflections. The other reflection is, look, I mean, this is you were very kind and gentle to present the statewide data. We could have gone in and looked at a particular district, because then it gets really ugly. We're not
Oh,
going to
yeah.
do that right now, because that would be like a 5-hour podcast, and we would like we would roast
we can do
like
it.
school just
I'm ready when you want. We can just do it, and we can do a Texas one too. If Omar sends me the data, I will crunch it happily as a nerd.
Yeah, and so my comment there is looking at this data that you presented, it is this, and so for our listeners, it's broken up by the different racial categories, but you could also do another level of analysis, looking at like Black African American and low income, Black African American low income and special education, Latino special education low income. And then you start to see more of the color about how the children are actually doing, right? So we talk a lot on this show about, I mean, we probably need to talk more about data. I feel like coming out of the pandemic with the learning loss conversation, many people are finally getting back on board with like, oh yeah, data matters. There's been such a huge pushback over the last decade, pre-pandemic, around data. They're like, data's racist. It doesn't tell us how kids are doing. I want to know about their feelings or about whatever, and it's like, data matters. It's an important piece of understanding student progress, right? And so we're talking about it now. And I think for districts, for states, for the federal government, for individual schools, you've got to get into the practice of looking at data like you're presenting it, and then going even deeper to do the cuts around low income, special ed, EL learners, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the tools are there, but it does require.
And listen to what it's telling you. Like, I mean, because that was one of the things that Bill just said. He was like, oh, this is not really. That's why I added the California states, because I wanted to give an apples to apple. I wanted to give here's how these districts are doing with a lot of people opting out. Here's what I mean, because the people who are not taking it says a lot as well, right? Yeah. I mean, there was one group that was like, we're not missing this test. There was one group that was like, we might be a small number, but we're a mighty number, and we about to talk So I mean, Omar, I know this is California stuff, but I know, I can just change the state and it'll be very similar or whatnot. I mean, you deal with this, you help people kind of understand and decipher data, or you understand the importance of using it with your staff. I mean, just jump on in here, man. I definitely want to hear from you. You're muted, but I know you said something angelic,
It was
I know it was beautiful. Still muted, but I mean, you got the voice of an angel over there. I don't know what's happening.
I think the Texas Heat got his mic.
The muted voice of the angel. A couple things. So one, this is the biggest discrepancy that I've seen, in that data is wonderful and data is needed and assessment is needed. The question is, what do you do with that data once you see it? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if a lot of educators actually know what to do with that data. Mm-hmm. And some educators have a very draconian way of dealing with this. So you see this from a lot of like, quote, high achieving charter schools and so forth. And it's like, we're going to drill and kill to get this data up. And like, cool, listen, that's awesome. I'm all for academic gains, but at what cost to the like social and emotional well-being of these kids? And people are like, I don't care about the social emotional. I'm like, I do. What are you going to create? Like a gaggle of kids who can like, pass a literacy exam really well, but have no common sense, have any sense of purpose, and really don't have like an optimistic view of the future, or just burnt out and hate school. So now, like, are you really propelling these kids past post-secondary? On the other end of the spectrum, you've got, well, we got to take care of our kids. And I'm like, yeah, dude, at what cost? If you're not teaching these kids how to read, you're just setting them up for a life of poverty and failure. This is the microcosm that I think our listeners really want to hear. And again, like, hey, let me plug South Star Classroom. Like, yo, we solved it. Literally, we have this formula and we can come in and help you guys out in consulting services to solve it. Is that
Data will tell you that the circumstances are dire, but no one is going to tell you what to do with that data or essentially how to solve the problem. And you'll have one group of people basically being like, we know kind of what to do academically, but I haven't seen a group of people basically say, this is holistically how to solve this problem, because there's very few of us in this country that have a holistic solution to saying, how do we have kids love school because the support systems are there, build up the social emotional learning component so that they become much more autonomous, which then gives them the motivation to do rigorous high level academics and continue this circle on and on and on, so that kids are spiraling upwards. This has been the misnomer in public education for the last 70 years. There's not a solution, and if there was, we'd be doing it. So sure, we can point alarm to the statistics that demonstrate, hey, oh my God, we're not doing well. I'm like, yeah, man, we've known that for a long time, but I'm glad the rest of the country is catching up with us. But I'm telling you, who in education right now says, I know exactly what to do? Because I guarantee you, and I'm going to talk smack about 80% of the people that say, I know what to do. You can use all the buzz terms in the world. Oh, we need more social emotional learning. We need higher level of academic rigor. We need creative problem solving. And I'm like, cool. How do you actually do that in a school and a school system? Because I guarantee that, like, listen, Ciro, I haven't heard an ill-devised plan like that since like since like the aqueducts decided to take a radical turn downwards because we couldn't figure out how to get the barbarians from the gate. I mean, Jesus, if these are the gatekeepers of our society, we'd be better kept with Gary Busey after a 4-day alcoholic binge telling us what to do. These are the people telling us how to solve educational matters.
I love Gary Busey.
I mean, let's be honest here. Like, our educational solutions literally look like that surfer house that Gary Busey blew in on in Point Break, filled with enough common sense to essentially say, hey, is this the direction America should go? Hell yeah. And this is going to staple right into the article where why are people voting for the Republican Party so much? Because as people come in and say, this is what we should be doing, 80 to 90% of them have their heads so shoved far up their butt that they're, you know, that you might as well stick breath mints in the other end to help out with that scenario. They have no clue how to actually implement the solutions. They can just tell you this is what we should be doing. Meanwhile, David, Charles, and I are like, why aren't you asking us? Because we've actually done it, implemented it, but you don't want to hear from us because you're fearful.
You speaking it. Go ahead.
Yeah, but like, look, let me just finish and be like, you're fearful of not just our competency, but what is going to happen when we get Black and brown kids to the level of competency that like traditionally was only served by middle and upper middle income kids. Yep. That may scare the shit out of the far right. That may scare the shit out of a lot of people to be like, we're like, what's going to happen when Black and brown people are running around being the CEOs, because now the educational attainment is what it should have been. And we're essentially looking at a diversified country where now the staple of leadership has gone from 80% white to now something significantly more entailed with the demographics of this country.
Mm-hmm.
And like
to David, because I know, and this is my fault. I know we spend a lot more time on mine. I know you got an incredible article, Omar, and I have a response, but I'll put it in my final thought. Because I have a solution that I'm thinking of that is in line with what you're saying, but it also is a different way of looking at this problem. But I'm gonna throw it to David because I'm passionate about this, and I'm gonna end up taking up the whole time. My apologies, but Omar, I love the heat that you brought. But I think you were dovetailing into your article, and like you were making that beautiful transition. So keep going, brother.
Yeah. No, Omar's going.
Yeah. I was telling you to keep going. I just was telling you.
All right, I got you, man.
Yeah.
I got you. Like, let me do three things here and connect all the pieces. we presented data basically demonstrating that the state of education in California is horrific when it comes to Black and brown kids. That's usually tied to the the socioeconomic circumstances of those kids. Now that we've identified the fact that this is a disparaging situation, people are like, we should do something about it. What I'm saying is that the people that are saying we should do something about it have no idea what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that being said, you have a group of highly competent people that are like, I actually know what to do about it. And you may not like the answers because everyone in this country simply wants a silver bullet. Give me a basic, simple explanation of how to solve this problem. And it goes back to the movie The American President. Like, I love that movie. I quote that movie all the time. I thought it was an exemplary example of like what is going on. And in that movie, you had a Democratic president, and for whatever political parties you guys are on, like, I'm just trying to make a statement here. You had a Democratic president and a Republican hopeful. And the Democratic president finally got sick and tired of what the Republicans were saying. And he's like, let me tell you what's up. The Republican Party can only do two things: telling you what the problem is and who to blame for it. And there's no solution. But this is what gets people revved up. Let me throw the blame away from myself.
Mm-hmm.
And like, look, I don't want to get off on a rant here, but like, as we talk about racial equity in the United States, David Charles and I will be the first to tell you, this isn't a Black or brown problem. Racial equity isn't a Black or brown problem. We're not the ones who created racism, and we're not the ones who created racial inequity. That's a white problem.
Mm-hmm.
White people created it. White people should start solving it. But this is exactly the problem that the Republican Party is demonstrating right now. White people don't want to hear that. And what people, regardless of race, want to hear about is it's really your responsibility to start moving this trajectory forward. No. What people want to hear is, oh my God, it's not my problem. It's somebody else's problem. I'm going to direct the blame towards them. Right now, the Republican Party is doing an exceptional job of creating a narrative of all of these problems that we're finding. It's not your fault. It's really somebody else's fault. It's the liberals' fault. It's the Democrats' fault. It used to be Russia's fault, but now they're in love with Russia, and God knows what their stance is. What's going on right now that's fascinating is that for the first time in modern history since, I would arguably say, FDR, and the revival of like a new Democratic Party right around Woodrow Wilson, is that it used to be the Democrats would have the overwhelming majority of the minority vote, Black and Latino and Asians, right? And the Republicans would be like, well, we got the white vote, but here's how much minority vote we got. What we're seeing right now is that Republicans are gaining a massive amount of what traditionally was minority-driven Democratic vote. Why? Why? And I'd love like for us to just sit there and ponder a question of like, why are the Republicans gaining the minority vote? And look, I'll give a very simple conclusion right now. It's like, listen, traditionally Democrats can solve the problems, but Republicans do a really good job of messaging, here's the problem, who's to blame for it, and make themselves seem like they can solve the problem. But let's be honest here. What's the last thing that Republicans actually solved? Anyone?
I mean, I can answer. I think part of it is, I think they have a narrative that is actually just going after a problem. But two, I think there's a lot of white folks in the Republican Party, as in the Democrat Party. I think that there's a lot of fear over there around a lot of where culture is going and things like that. And I think our friends on the left, our extreme left, are not helping that case and are pushing people who used to be considered to be very leftist, and they're starting to look conservative. And then if you're gonna like ostracize me and do these things, then let me at least go over here where I can at least say what I want to say, or I can do this, right? Like, it seems like some of those ethos have kind of switched over. I'm not in love with very far right people or very left leaning people. I don't like any of you, right? I am looking at this more as a, we look at these systems and these parties and these, like, I'm not looking at the school. I'm not looking at the parties, Omar. I'm not looking at, I want churches. I want the black churches and the brown churches, because black and brown people are some faithful people, whether it's Catholic, Baptist, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, right? Like, we some faithful people. Like, I want them picking up this data and being like, look, we need an alternative. Either we gonna start tutoring or we gonna build our own vocational programs. Like, we don't even build stuff here no more. You know what I mean? Like, I think that I'm going to engage with this article, right? And what you said, Omar, because I think it's actually very poignant in the way that you kind of pointed it out. My heart is not in that Democrat Republican conversation, because I've worked in a Democratic Party. I've been there. I've helped build some of these things. And every time I brought up stuff about black people and black education and stuff like that, it was never the right time. It's never the right time for the black issues there. And I do say, as somebody who is on a black and brown podcast, where brown people, you don't know who a brown person is voting for with very real mathematical accuracy. You might get a little closer depending on what neighborhood you in, but with black people, you can guess 8 out of 10 times, you can guess correctly who we're voting for, and we don't get catered to, we don't get talked to, we get platitudes, we get a parade, we get a march, we get performative things, but we don't get anything that actually helps us. So I don't know if that necessarily answered, and I wasn't trying to go off on your answer, Omar, because I actually love the way that you proposed it. I'm just having a very black like reaction to like Republicans and Democrats, because we are on our own. That data shows me that we are on our own, and we are fools if we keep looking to schools and the government and Republican or Democrat or anybody else outside of us to fix it. We need some agency.
Yeah. Let me quickly dive in, and then I'm sorry, David. I want to address two quick things. One, I'm with you both. Like, I teed that up like none other. Listen,
you did a great
Democrats
job.
are doing a terrible job of messaging, because like while we should be messaging how we solve problems in reality, we're talking about all of these like ridiculous issues. Again, I always bring up the Latinx issue, and I'm like, Jesus, dude, do I care about Latinx? What I care about is jobs and education for our kids. How about we not just solve it? How about we message it out? And this is what Bill was getting into to directly answer your question. Bill, the answer is out there, but there's so few of us that know actually how to implement it. And yet our voice, this is why we've got a podcast, this is why we got a show, is often stifled, because our voice of reason and logic on how to figuratively solve a problem is so washed out with what is literally like the insanity of a children's party clown after a 15-pill fentanyl rant on the right side and on the left side, that it's like, here we are in the middle talking logic, and you got the children's party clown on both sides of the aisle drowning out the voice. And this is what Doc gets into. Yes, it's us. Yes, it's our agency. But until we're able to wake people up and get us to have the voice, oh my God, we're going to continue being in this like ludicrous quagmire echo chamber that, literally feels like I just got thrown through Alice's like wonder hole after taking 15 levels of mushrooms. That's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. David, sorry to cut you off, but this is where we're at, guys.
No, I think we're at a confluence, right? There's so many different things pushing in that all have to do with education at the end of the day. And so starting from what we were talking about earlier, not going to get into all the different pieces, but there was a Chalkbeat piece that I'm just going to reference for one point. Talks about, learning loss, right? And what we know, given the data, is that the racial and poverty level, achievement gaps that we have historically seen and we are all too familiar with have worsened coming out of the pandemic. So we know that, right? That is fact. I think fast forwarding to this other political conversation around what voters are feeling or thinking about, like who can actually bring a solution. I agree with your point, Omar, and part of what you said, Charles. The Democrats are offering very, very good talking points that are resonating with voters. We've seen some some pretty mind-boggling polling recently come out like last week, which if I were, a leader in the Democratic Party, I would be scrambling right now, because education has become a much higher priority voting issue, where, voters across the board, in higher percentages are siding with Republican candidates to actually solve education issues, right? We've seen that data. That's like new, fresh polling data. And some of it actually came out of, I think, an AFT poll. The teachers union put out a poll, and they got, some very interesting results back. So what does that mean? On one side, the Republican solution, based on what I've seen, has actually very little to do with like improving instruction within schools, aside from like banning books and banning any kind of like sexual education or gender identification education in schools. But it's like this scorched earth, like school choice push that they're doing. We're not going to fix anything. We're just going to bypass what we already have set up. We're going to bypass the public school district system, and in many cases, the charter school system, and push public money into private school education vouchers or whatever you want to call them, right? And that's not solving the problem. That's a Band-Aid, right? And you're actually harming the greater good when you abandon the systems that the vast majority, 90% of students attend, public education. That's on one side, and that's a winning message right now. On the other side, and the only thing I have to say here is not a lot, because I haven't seen a whole lot of messaging coming out of the Democratic Party around what their plan is to improve educational services via public education. I don't think they really have a platform yet, and that's a big problem. The Republicans will offer this panacea of like school choice and vouchers and private schools, and that's winning right now. And the Democrats have yet to step up into that space, and it's going to be it's highly problematic. Rewind all the way back to what we started talking about, is the end result is through this like kind of scorched earth school choice that the Republicans are proposing, and vouchers, it's not going to impact or benefit the vast majority of low income Black and brown children that we talk about on the show. And at the same time, we know that the achievement and opportunity gaps have grown coming out of the pandemic. So we actually don't have a very clear solution at this moment.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, listen,
It was a lot.
No, it wasn't. I think, especially with both of these articles and where the conversation is going, like, this is why we built this, right? Because the people that are listening, you don't have to be Omar, David, or Charles. You don't have to like have worked in this system, or it doesn't hurt. But what I'm saying is that I'm just showing you not to awfulize our people, not to just kind of pile on around. Oh, look, there go Black people with them bad test scores again. I'm just trying to exemplify and show that it's a lot of rhetoric. People up there doing their best Shakespeare impersonation in the fucking halls of justice at the Capitol, and ain't nothing changed for you. And Democrats, it's a bunch of white people who kids is in private schools, who kids go to the top schools, but they hate charter schools because it goes against because they think it challenges their union. And then on the Republican side, you have people that's saying the right stuff and saying, okay, academic freedom, you should be able to choose, but with the other breath are saying, and we should like say, that slavery word, we shouldn't use that no more. We should actually do this and do that. Both of these groups will kill you. Both of these groups will take everything out of you. And what I'm saying is, it comes back to the final point, and I'm going to shut up after this. I don't need to say nothing else. Omar has talked about this, like, this comes back to what we have to like step up, and we got to do this, man. Like, we can't let either one of these sides kill us. We have to step into that gap. Like, there are if that's what's happening in Oakland and people talking about feelings and all that stuff, I want to see a vocational school open up where we showing numbers. Well, we like got plumbers where people are leaving bonded, people got great jobs, people are able, like, we act like in the 60s and 70s, like black people, brown people wasn't out here working with good factory jobs that they were able to raise families on, man. And I just feel like we just keep taking a brunt. I'm way too emotional for this episode. Y'all go ahead. I'm very upset by these numbers.
I mean, I don't know why you're apologizing for being upset by something that, like, we inevitably have known for the longest of time.
Right.
But I think is your level of upset that the very people that we have hoped would look at these numbers and exercise some level of urgency to solve. Are you surprised that they haven't solved shit?
I'm not surprised that they haven't solved shit. I'm surprised and upset and saddened that we keep expecting them to. I am sad that we keep having that conversation. It is like if David has a son and David's son needs to clean his room, but David's son keeps saying, but my cousins are coming into town. They're going to clean it. They said they're going to clean it when they get here. It's going to be like, what your cousins got to do with this room right now? What the Democrats and Republicans, what like, yes, they might have the power. Yes, they might be it might be their fault. But I love my people. And I want to see us thrive. And leaning on these people, it ain't that we're not going to thrive. I'm telling you, man, I done said this over and over. That refrigerator is broken. You keep feeding your kid spoiled milk from it and wondering why they got a tummy ache, man. Like, we have to stop doing that. Give them some damn water. You can't have milk today. The milk is bad.
I think this is where I get a bit I'm not shocked, and maybe this is a weird parallel between Dr. Cole and I, but I have an unbelievable optimism that the world can be a better place. That optimism is fueled in my belief in children, and that the children can be educated to make the world a better place. And this is why I do what I do. It's funny because as you know, the doc always talks about, we're out here on our own. Like, I've had that ideology since I was 15 years old. And the thing that I want to capture is that it's not just that the fridge is broken. It's that people think that, oh, you know, if we just unplug and plug this fridge back in, we're going to be okay. And what I'm saying is, like, you want to fix the fridge. And, like, look, someone threw out the F-bomb earlier, and, you know, we got sponsors and stuff. I'm like, F that fridge. I destroyed that fridge 10 years ago, and I'm building a brand new refrigerator that's doing 20 times the work that any refrigerator has ever done. Because if we keep expecting folks to come and fix the damn broke fridge, like, we're moving in the wrong direction. I'm creating a brand new refrigerator in a brand new house and a brand new system altogether. And this is exactly what's needed. But this is exactly where I get to the point of, you know, whatever it be, frustration, like, I'm doing it. And yet people take a shit all over it. And I know you're taking a shit all over it because you are scared, petrified that we're going to do something that you've been enabled to do for the last 70 years, and you're scared shitless of the results. Good. Now I know that I'm doing the right thing. But if we keep expecting a system to take a broke-ass fridge with a group of mechanics who literally couldn't follow instructions if they were fed intravenously through an IV through their veins into their cerebrum, then, oh my God, we're headed in the wrong direction. You're trusting, like, you're talking about the cousins coming in. I'm worried about this broke-ass group of mechanics who literally have just sat there with a broken fridge and they're like, if we just shake it a little bit, it'll solve everything for them black and brown kids. Oh, man. You have to destroy the damn fridge. The system itself isn't built to get the results that we need to get. And you keep expecting a group of broke-ass mechanics to solve a broke-ass fridge instead of saying, destroy the fridge, get a brand new group of innovators, not mechanics, innovators, to tell the mechanics, here's what to do, and then recreate the system from scratch. We're up on the wrong foot. Now, listen, like, I may be as carried away as Willy Wonka giving away the 5 tickets to Charlie Bucket and the rest of the Grandpa family medley, but isn't this what we need in American education? And isn't it going to take group like the South Star Classroom, like the 8 Black Hands, to start having the dialogue, to start inspiring other people to say there's a different way? But you've been so fearful about following that different way out of, like, I don't know, those mechanics telling you that it's impossible. I just proved those mechanics. What you've been doing has been wrong your entire life. Sorry, guys, what you've been doing your entire career is wrong. You've been doing it wrong and you don't know the right way to do it. Cool. Step out of the way.
But it's wrong in whose perspective, though, right? And David, so sorry we didn't get to your topic, but I will forego mine in the next one. But to your point, though, I would say this: it's wrong, but it's not impacting them, right? It's they own the shop and they still rich and they cars all work, and you're still got to come and you're still giving me your car and you're still giving me your business. It is going to stay the same. And I'm very curious with the brown community, and I'm not trying to lump you all together, but if I was brown, I would actually look at those numbers and I'd feel some sense of hope, because you are a group that is about to be catered to in a different type of way. They are trying to split you up in different ways now. This is why they have such emerging brown Republicans, and Democrats are trying to fight to get that, right? Like, they actually have to talk and engage you. And as somebody who's Black, and we've hovered between 12 and 14% since before I was born. And oh yeah, in California, wherever there was a concentration of Blackness, we have thrown something in the middle of that and dispersed them. Oakland used to be a Black city. It's not no more. The Fillmore used to be a historically Black town. It's not no more. Oh, and guess what? Democrats didn't give a damn when Black people were getting pushed out of the Fillmore. But when tech bros came in and started to piss on the white people that was there, then it was an issue. The people that I have seen be very resilient during this time has been brown people. I live in a very segregated neighborhood now. Dalton is a historically Black place. The Irish have historically Black places in Chicago. The Italians, a whole bunch of people. You know who don't care about that? Mexicans. They be like, we are moving in this joint and we got a plan and this is what we're going to do. And I'm saying that from a place of respect. You know what I mean? I'm saying that from a place where I'm seeing a people that is continuing to grow and expand their reach. And like, oh, you're not going to give us good education? Cool. Well, we cutting everybody's grass here and we doing just fine. And like, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to flip it out here. I think it's a deeper conversation, and I don't want to go into it with ignorance, you know what I mean? But I'm looking at it with a level of admiration for what I've seen some of you all's people do. And I would just love to be a fly on the wall. I probably don't have that privilege, but I would love to hear what those powerful brown folk, because y'all people planning too. Like, there's somebody in the power structure that's like, yo, what is this about to look like? You know what I mean? And it's a lot of brown people that hate brown people. So I need to pull myself out that conversation and listen to y'all on that. But I'm just telling you, from somebody on the outside looking in, I'm doing it with an admiring eye.
It's amazing. I mean, I think you look at some of the most critical voices in many different regions. Take Oakland, for example, that are super critical of non-segregated, charter schools in like Deep East Oakland or Fruitvale that happen to be 90% Latino students. And the largest critics are like white people that have nothing to do with it, right? And so I want to read a quote, because this has got me thinking, like in the philosophical level here. Youths are passed through schools that don't teach, then forced to search for jobs that don't exist, and finally left stranded in the street to stare at the glamorous lives advertised around them, right? Huey P. Newton, right? Mm-hmm. And so this conversation, both where we started, Charles, with like the data conversation, and we kind of knew what to expect, and there it is. And then the political conversation that Omar brought to us, some of that we can control, some of it we can't. I think it's just got my head like thinking more towards, like we actually know what solution we have. Solutions. We have, the Omar School, the El Paso Leadership Academy. Mm-hmm. We have charter school networks. We have some district schools. There are actually school systems and schools that are bucking the trend. We just looked at some data coming out of like New York City, Maybe we'll bring this on a future episode, looking at like early literacy for Black and brown students in charter schools versus NYC public schools. And it's mind-boggling. The charters are doing a better job of educating children. So these solutions are there. There are people that are committed and doing the work. My brain goes to like, well, what's the mechanism? Are you going to actually be able to shake up large, entrenched, historically bureaucratized entities? Probably not. And so what's the next level? It's charter schools, right? And so this episode has gotten me thinking on, like doubling down on my commitment to figuring out, how we can scale up both, small networks and large networks through the mechanism that we know as charter schooling. There's a lot of good that happens in charter schools, some bad stuff, but I think it's a way to actually create these schools for our own communities that are locally owned, locally generated, locally created, and accountable to our own communities, right? Because we're actually doing the work. I mean, I think Omar is like able to like periscope up to the bigger picture, but then also he knows that he's running a network in his communities and they're actually doing the work. So the evidence is there. And I think, for organizations like the Charter School Growth Fund, for EdLock, any of these schools that are like supporting there's like what do they call it? Like the Liberation Group, or is it Charter School Collaborative, right? Something like that. Like these folks, this work is really critical right now. And so maybe we can design a future episode around them or have some of them on to talk about some of the work that we're doing, because
I'd love to.
Look, the solutions are there and they're pulling out some really good data. And I want to go back to an earlier point because I don't want to seem like Mr. Test Score. But I do agree with what Omar was saying earlier. It's not just about the academic indicators. It's like looking at the holistic indicators. Are kids even showing up to school? Are they showing up on time? What other data are we looking at? Are we looking at student survey data, family survey data, staff survey data, right? Just to get a big picture of how healthy our schools are and how responsive our schools are to serving our communities. So, it's a lot to churn on today. So thank you for this discussion.
Now, this has been great, man. I got to run and get ready for the next thing, but I appreciate you, brothers. I needed this for my soul and my spirit. And we got to just keep trekking, man. That's David. That's Omar. I am Charles. And we will see you next week. Same bad time, same bad station. Peace out. And Omar's hair will be blacker. You know what I'm saying? Our resident motto, even looks good in 189-degree weather.
Always is black. The blacker the better, baby.
Always bet on black.
Always bet on black, baby. We'll see y'all.